Well, hello and welcome to my second tutorial slash walkthrough where I come back to my previous VFX that I made, 5 months ago. I actually been working on the next one without basically doing the breakdown of this one. So this is the effect that I'm talking to. This is the Spectramancer Ultimate from Honkai Impact 3rd. Yes. And we're gonna dive in right away, and I'm gonna explain you and trying to dissect how I made this effect. So I start basically by modeling those little capsules and animating them so I can have an animation to work on. The basic one. Pretty easy. So when you did your animation, you imported into Unreal. I did the imports, and yes, you're gonna see that's actually quite weird over here, but you're gonna understand quickly why. This is the blueprint. I just import the skeletal mesh component, and I just use an animation asset that comes with it. And this is basically where I plugged each VFX. So I started by just, if you can go into the notify, add notify, play Niagara particle effect. And then from that, you choose the one that you want to place. And then you can actually play with the location, rotation, etc. So there is like 2 slashes, horizontal, let's say like curved one, and one straight one. There is the explosion, and then there is all the clones that actually strikes. So I went ahead and I basically disabled most of them, and I'm gonna basically enable them, and you will see how I made these effect. So let's dive in. So the first one would be the slash, and I'm gonna show you how I made the slash and in general how I made them. So I start by using emitters that spawn in burst, so just one particle, and I spawn a mesh. So I will spawn those types of mesh, so I can actually show you the wireframe. And I can show you also the UV. So I'm going to explain you why I put my UV this way. So how do you model something like this? Usually I create either a cylinder, and then I basically move the vertices with a lattice, or you can directly start with like a strip, a long strip, and then you can bend it with a lattice. But the important things over here is that basically the UVs will start from one side of the UV, and you can actually scroll, for example, all along it. So now basically I'm going to explain you why I put this UV this way instead of well, this is these instead of, let's say, full unwrap. Is basically I use texture that I'm gonna scroll on top of it. So I'm gonna find you the texture. So this is this one. So it looks weird because there is 3 channel on it. If you isolate the channel, you will understand that basically each one of them actually serve one purpose. So in this case, I'm going to use the red channel. So this is basically the texture that I will display on the mesh. So on the curve slash, so this is the one that you see over here. And if I unwrap my curved support for the slash this way, it is that I can still use the wrapping tiling method as opposed as the clamp, for example. So this is my way of basically making, I can show you in the curve. And so this way I can basically animate the textures scrolling around without having the textures like mapping back and wrapping back into the end. So basically I'm sure that this way there is some leeway over here that the textures can actually go off screen and off UV. So you can either, of course, use like normal unwrapping and taking like a normal texture. And of course, like just put your textures into clamp. So basically it will be clamping like if your borders of textures are black, they won't be visible. But this is just my way of doing the stuff up. So let's go back into the slash. So this is the mesh. I put my material on it that will basically just UV scroll the texture on it. I use for that a dynamic material parameter where I just animate this value, which is the pan U that I just create. Of course, on top of that, because the texture is red, I mean the color is red, I can just use a color node in the particle update, so I can actually animate the color. And what I also usually do with the slush is I create a small scale size mesh. So it's not that much. It usually goes from, this one goes from 1 to 1.2, and it's barely noticeable, but as you can see, it's growing a little bit, so it avoids that the textures stay perfectly still. So this is the core. This is the core of the slash. Usually on top of that, what I do is I create the same one. So this is going to be the slash shell. That's going to be basically black, so or darker color, so it will create some contrast. So this one is exactly the same as the first one, except that basically I used a different color. And in the scale mesh attribute, as you can see, the scale is like 0.25. This one is slightly bigger, so you can actually see that is hacked like a shell, so it actually encompasses it. And this one could actually work like a core. So when you do that, you basically have the core of your slash. What you can do to add some detail on it, I had it some, I call that ember, but it's kind of misleading. It will be more like an impact thingy. So this one is also really simple. If I go into the texture, it's really basically, I can actually show you over here. It's a 2x2 texture that I just use the opacity mask and the emissive. And I make sure that in the sub UVs I'm actually using also a 2x2, and in the particle spawn in the sub image indexed I take like a random between 0 and 3, so it will spawn like random of them, and I use that as an impact effect. On top of that, we can have some dark dust. This one is interesting. If you look on the top, it will create some follow-up movement for the slash. You can isolate it so you can actually see it better. So this one is interesting because it creates from a cylinder location. So as you can see, I put the radius over there, and I used a vortex velocity in the update. Well, I shouldn't. I should have put that into the spawn. Well, it works pretty well. And again, it's an effect that I made 5 months ago, so I kind of learned a little bit, one thing or two in between. But anyway, so yeah. So, and it is using the same texture as the previous one, as the embers. They are just like smaller and they are darker. And on top of that, I used a dash distort. So this one is using actually, this one is using the same mesh as previously, but it uses a refraction material. So this refraction material, as you can see, it uses a lerp between a value of 1 and a value of 1.33. And the mask will be both the particle color and some texture sample. And if you have that, I can actually show you with a better can I actually show you with a better previews and settings detail? You should have some previews and settings for yes. So I'm gonna set the show environment and also show the floor, so you can actually see the sky. And usually, yes, usually you see it everywhere. So Yeah, I don't have it over here. So quickly, do you have a previews and settings in the previews and settings over there? Yes. So if you remove the floor, yeah, it's actually, will it be visible? I guess. So if you, there you can see it. You can see it on the cloud. So the distort will actually use a refraction and will be a nice addition to actually blend your effect on top of it. And there's no dynamic material parameter. It's just like distorts and goes away. And this is the full effect. So I can save it and show it to you in the boom, boom, boom. Okay. Well, this is actually not visible. Okay. So now that we met our first curved slash, we can actually go for the straight one. And well, the straight one is basically the same as the one what we did before, except that instead of having, well, you know, a curved support for the slash, we have quite a straight one. That's it. That's the I can just, yes, that's better. That's the only main difference that we have over here. So it's using also the same. So we have the core, which is the colored one, the really bright one. We have the shell, which is creating the contrast, the black one. The embers that actually are the impact. The dark dust, they're actually the little particle floating around. And this one is actually missing a distortion, but whatever. Okay. Then we have so 1, 2, 3, and we have this big nice explosion that I can leave it for the end. It's pretty cool. We can actually go for the clones. Actually, I can show you a little bit how I made the clones. So the clone are interesting. I started by modeling a copy of my. If you press L and then you can actually control the light so you can see the mesh better. So I created a copy of my capsules. Of course, if you got mesh, you can use the real mesh, and I just distort them a little bit this way. And in the clone, and what I did is I animate them with the system location. So if you, I'm gonna remove the particle count. So here you can see the effect. So I'm just using a Fresnel effect for the clone. Nothing really fancy. I'm just using the Fresnel in the opacity so I can only see the outline. Okay, and what I did is actually pretty interesting. You can animate meshes or even normal particle by using system location in the particle update. So what I did is create a curve over here, and you started from -1000 and you go from almost 1000 quite quickly. And if you zoom out, you can see basically that your mesh particle is dashing forward. Pretty nice. So again, we can actually also add our slash cores. So it's the core system is the same as the one that we did for the slashes. It's something bright. So for this one, I'm actually used the same mesh as the one that I used for the straight one. So it's also really bright, 2000. It creates some bloom effect over here. And it's the same also, where is the slash core? Yeah, the opacity over here is animated, oops, my bad, is animated and create the scrolling effect. Because it's this, yes, so in the particle, I use the particle color alpha as an UV scroll over here. for some reason. I don't remember that, but it worked. Okay, so we have the slash core over here. So the same one I used, so again, a shell. So this one's going to be a blacker version of the core, bigger on top of it. And then we have the distort. That basically I can show you the mesh for this one. So it's a long, like tubular mesh. And I use this one to apply the distort refraction effect on it. And again, so I need to show you with the preview send settings, because if you want to see refraction, it's always better to have something to refract. So this is only the distortion, as you can see. It creates this cool distortion effect when you dash. And this one is actually pretty cool. It creates some clones as you dash through, some mini clones. And for that, I'm gonna just not show the environment. It's actually quite cool. I used the parent dashing clone as and the event handler. So basically, in any particle, you can add event handler, and you can basically use that parent. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not this one. I'm saying some bull crap. Yet it's over there. So in the particle, you can actually either in the update or the spawn generate events. So you can generate either death event, collision, or location event. So I create location event in the update. And for the child, what I did is I pressed the plus icon over here in the event handler, and I added an event handler property and a receive location event. And from that, basically, as you can see, like I receive from the source dashing clone event, I receive their location, and I create over there, I spawn from the position of the dashing clone. For that, I think that for that, the only thing that you need to be sure about is that the parent needs to require persistent ID. Yeah, I think it's the only thing to be careful about. So if it doesn't actually work, you need to require persistence ID from the parent. But this is it. We have our dash. Zoom, 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 zoom. Very nice. And now for the end, we have the explosion. The juice here for the end. So I can hide the particle count, and we're gonna start by the bigger one, the flame. So for the flame, I can show you in wireframe basically what happened. And then you don't really understand what's happening because it's really different. It is because my material actually used Vertex Offset. So I can show you how it's done. So if I remove the dynamic parameter, the color, you should be able to see, yes. So this is the effect without the animation. So for that, I'm gonna remove and disable for now the Vertex Offset. So you might actually, it's 100. Okay, so well, let's put everything at 0. So here you can actually see the wireframe, so something that actually matched the wireframe. And if I remove also the flow map, so if I get something like black instead, yes. So that there you can see the pure texture. So this is the texture and how they should behave. So this one, haha, now I get the point. I get the, because it's when you open new windows. Okay, so this is the texture. So the red, the green, and the blue. So you can see them scrolling maybe there, so you can see the blue scrolling red on the other side, maybe, etc. And this is the texture diffuse that I use, mapped from bottom to top, the white, pinkish red, darker red are mapped from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to reactivate quickly the work position offset, so you can see there. And also, well, it's actually quite interesting to see. So this is the texture, the pure texture, and I'm also going to reactivate the flow map. This one, yes, there you can see, and you can see the difference. So you can definitely add more detail thanks to that. So I'm going to dive into the material quickly. And I'm actually wondering if this mesh is, no, this one is a sphere, right? Oh, this is interesting. I'm gonna like let you show what I'm actually seeing this time. I'm gonna select the cylinder impact. I'm gonna use this one as something to see. Yes, and then you can, so actually I'm not using this one, I'm use this one. Yes, you can see like white on the bottom, pinkish, and then it goes up. So, and also again, I will just drop that to 0, and I don't think it actually changes anything on the mat, because yeah, it doesn't really matter. Just give me a sec. Okay, explanation right now, sir. So this is the color and how I handle the color. I use for that a color LUT, a lookup table. So I take this texture, so it's a gradient. Whoop. You can see it, I guess. And I remap that from the bottom, as I said, from the bottom to the top. Okay. And this is the good one. So this handle the color. This will handle, yeah, that's a lot of nodes. I'm just gonna push that down and push that on the side, so you can actually, it is quite simple. It's just my way of doing stuff look a little bit complex, but this is actually quite simple. So I actually use only one texture, but this is the RGB channel that I use, and I add on top of each other. So this one uses, it's as you can see, it's the same texture for the 3 of them. I add them, I use some smooth step to actually get them well, to smooth step, and add them, saturate them, and I use, for example, this one, as I can start the preview. This is the black and white version that I can plug directly, for example, into the opacity over there. And yeah, so the 3 of those, for example, each one of those are actually controlling the UV, so I can control the tile, and I can control over here, for example, the speed, the scrolling speed and the axis, depending on if I put on X or Y. And the 3 of them are quite similar. I just scroll the texture in different direction, and I add them together. And this one is the flow map that I was talking about earlier, so this one. And as you can see, I plug this one into all of the texture coordinate as an add. So I add them into the 3 texture coordinate. And this one will, if I put this one again, that you can understand, if I put a black instead, yes, it will modify basically this result into that, thanks to the flow map V intensity, which is 1 for now. So if I put 0, it's the same result. 0.5, slightly less, 1, strong result. Yep. So my flow map will distort the UVs of my 3 RGB channel that I add together, and I plug in everything into the opacity, so it gives me this kind of flame effect. On top of that, stop previewing, and this is the juicy juice, the vertex offset. So for that I use, it should work if I put it there, yes. I use the blue channel of this one, which is a gradient from 0 to 1 to 0. It's wrapping. Okay. And I basically, this is a constant by a scale that I multiplied by the vertex normal of the inward space of the object. And this is what will, if I say 1, 1, for example, you can see that's going to be flatter. If I say 100, 100, it's going to be bulgier. And of course I've got a control of the vertex offset over here. There should be vertex offset pan along the v-axis. And I don't want to save. And from all of that, if you go back into the VFX, then you can animate with the dynamic material parameter the vertex offset. It's going to go from, let's say, minus 0.5 to C1.5, so it's going to scroll like 2 times. So it's going to have this kind of 2 bulge effect, like 1 bulge, 2 bulge, like blue, blue, and then it's going to calm down. And you have also a color on top of that. So, and as you can see, the color also, because the color also animates the alpha, you can see. I'm really hoping that it works. I'm not saying stupid stuff. Kinda. No, it doesn't actually work as I wanted. But anyway, I wanted the effect to fade out from either top to bottom or bottom to top. But anyway, this is the flame, and this is how it works. So of course I use the same one on the black. Again, contrast, etc. There is also something that I used on the reference. They actually had an air blast thingy that I thought it was actually quite cool to replicate. So I can slow down a little bit the time. Here you can see it better. So it's actually quite really quick. Don't see very well, but it is actually using, I think, a simpler copy of my previous material. It doesn't use vertex offset. It only uses flow map to distort a little bit the texture. Up. And this is the mesh. So the mesh is actually quite weird to see. So those long stripes are actually the one you see from the top, those like blast of air. And those like corolla effects, those cones represent, of course, the blast of air in the middle. And what I did basically is, if I remove the dynamic material parameter that basically controls the UV scroll, this is the default texture, and this is what happens when you make it scroll. Scroll. There. So this is the air blast that happened really quickly before the flame. It really adds to the impact, I think. Boom. Then we have a wave, basically. I can actually, yes, put this one here. So the wave is actually, well, again, it's still a mesh. So I use alpha circle from that, which is actually mapped 1 to 1. and this is the texture that I use. So this is basically a use of, again, flow map. The flow map in this case allowed me to create, again, maybe, yes, create this burned effect. And the strength of the flow map will basically give me the more detail. If I remove it, like black, yes, this is basically the texture. And if I put it back, here you can see. So the flow map is distorting the UV to get this kind of result. And this is, if you go back into the black, yes, this is the texture that you can see on the red. Up, this is the red one. This is the one that I applied to the half circle mesh. And yes, and this is the one when I distorted. So on top of that, I just animate the color, and then you're good to go. Because it's on top of that, of course, I will use the black one, which is the same one again, but in black again, you know, like contrast and stuff. Then we have a crack on the bottom. So the crack is also using a plane, so it's also a mesh. And this is the material that I use for that. So I'm using the R and the G channel of this texture. So if you go inside there, so in the R channel, oops, yes, R channel will be the mask, would be the actual crack, and the green channel would be the illumination. So there you have two texture. You have one texture that controls both the black that I put in the base color and the orange that I will put in the emissive color. Okay. Then what do we have? Oh yes, one which is actually quite important to hit. It's the cylinder. That this one is actually happening when it strikes. It has a lot of impact. So again, it is a mesh. That is cylinder, and I use this erosion material. It's actually quite, it's the same material that I used from my previous effect, the Rundle. Of course, there is a lot of stuff that I reuse. So this one is eroding the texture over time, as you can see. And we have the splash. So I'm gonna, yes, this one. So the splash is quite crude now that I watch it. But anyway, the splash is fortunately only a billboard, so it's only a sprite. And this is the red texture that I use. I put that into the opacity. I use I make sure, of course, to use that in the sub UV channel, only the 2, and I take random number between 0 and 3, so the four of them. And the final one is the embers. So this time they're actually embers, and those ones are actually Mege-Ythier particle and lit, are just bright. And if I yes, I put every one of them inside. I'll blast close, and here we are. This is our final effect. I'll apply and put it in full screen to finish. Yes, so I hope that I covered pretty much what you expected. I did it pretty quickly. I'm not really confident in my way of explaining things, so I'm really hoping that actually it helped you to actually understand a little bit how I did that. I will still try to finish the next one. The next one was I will try to make it just after, so it will be easier for me to explain. But yep, until then, I really hope to see you the next time. Yep, we'll see you then. Little oomph a little bit. So this is the core. This I will start with this first one. Then on top of that, I will use slash shell. Fucking hell. It's gonna be difficult.